Hello to my podcast audience in India, America, and abroad. I'm back, Sunny Sharma, with a podcast. I'm going to do a series of podcasts that highlight the 11 issues of electoral reform. That was my previous podcast, where I outlined 11 essentially electoral laws that need to be changed, electoral laws or requirements that are part of the electoral system that need to be reformed in this country in order to reform politics in America. And I'll be starting with number two on that list, which I think fundamentally is, along with number one, which was gerrymandering, is the most important thing that has to be considered when it comes to reforming electoral laws, and that is the Supreme Court's 21st century dismantling of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So just to highlight again, my podcast channel is India Insight with Sunny Sharma. My YouTube channel is Sunny Sharma at India Insight Movement. If you like hearing about American democracy and issues of democracy, poverty, liberty, and especially the topic of voting rights, please check out my channel. I talk a lot about voting and about pivotal figures in Georgia and some politicians in India and America who have always talked about the necessity to have a strong electorate. Specifically, what is being threatened in America today is the black voting bloc. The black voting bloc is being threatened because at the inception of American history, if we consider the historical record, the black people were never meant to be a significant voting bloc in this country because of slavery. And that's what I want to highlight before talking about the dismantling of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I want to highlight briefly what really happened, some key ideas, which is the first key idea is that forced labor is still legally permitted as a punishment for convicted crime. So because of the incarceration system, there is still legalized slavery if you have committed a crime in this country. And we have to essentially, some people should be convicted of crimes, but many people who are in the incarceration system are there because of nonviolent drug offenses, which if you've studied incarceration, many people understand that to reform the prison system, we have to reform the underlying systems of poverty in this country. So another thing that's important to note, which is related to this, is that the 13th Amendment was not just the first of the three foundational Reconstruction amendments enacted during the aftermath of the Civil War. It opened a path towards early civil rights acts in the 1960s through the enforcement of something called appropriate legislation to be amended for the sake of posterity. So the Reconstruction amendments opened the way for new legislation to be passed in the future. Although this took really a century until voting was expanded to all people, the Reconstruction amendments, even though Reconstruction was only a 12-year period, it was short. It was even a period shorter than that based upon who you ask. The Reconstruction amendments set the path towards new legislation in the future when Black equality was really mandated. And so, although the honoring of the historical symbolism demonstrated by the inception of Juneteenth, for example, has complemented the commemoration of Black History Month in February, what is truly required is the implementation of public policy that opposes the legacy of institutional racism embedded in our political culture that affects all Americans, especially the working class. So essentially, what I'm focused on, what I want to make clear is that electoral reform will lead to reforms in the working class and to reforms in poverty. I want to make it very clear that poor people, immigrants, Black people, poor whites, people below the poverty line, people who have medical debt or medical illnesses, they will all be affected by the reforms to the electoral system. So that's one of the foundational reasons which is the foundational reason why the electoral system has to be reformed in this country, and why a new political party has to be formed which will among many things, but will prioritize the focusing of electoral reform. So now to get into what's at stake concerning voting rights, which I'll just read the essay I wrote. The foundational mission of America's project in democratic self-government, ever since the Declaration of Independence was drafted in 1776, has always been the fulfillment of what President Obama calls the imperative of citizenship. Yet, This is a complicated history. America has never been a country where all people were offered the liberty and equality founded upon natural rights, reason, and common sense. Even at the beginning of America's constitutional system, slavery was a reality for over 250 years. It took the courage and daring of many people to not just reform the system, but provide their own narrative concerning the atrocious nature of bondage. Some of these people were remarkable and imperfect, while some clearly had tragic flaws. One of these remarkable advocates, who resoundingly claimed that the electoral franchise was a great power that not just protected liberty, but was a necessity to prevent a return to bondage, was the most famous American of the 19th century, Frederick Douglass. Particularly during the Reconstruction period from 1865 to 1877, Douglass became concerned not just about liberty from enslavement and all the privileges, rights, and opportunities it would provide through full citizenship that wasn't promised until a century later. He became concerned that without the vote, these very same provisions would result in a denial of basic rights. This is best expressed through his declaration that, quote, "A man's rights rest in three boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. Let no man be kept from the ballot box because of his color." Frederick Douglass. The right to vote entailed a whole series of privileges tied to full citizenship that didn't just build organized power. In times of crisis, it led to a real community. As articulated by Dr. King, voting was essential to creating the beloved community. Since the rise of neoliberalism and the gospel of wealth in the early 1970s, there has been a relentless and steady attack on the immense legislative victories gained by the civil rights movement, as well as the sometimes very abstract but very real community proposed by the New Left movement, Dr. King, and Black Power proponents. Principally, there has been an attack not just on the franchise, but on the very concept of Black constituents as I said before, a powerful and legitimate voting bloc. What is most striking of all is the clear dismantlement of the 1965 Voting Rights Act through two Supreme Court decisions in the 21st century. The 6-3 Shelby County v. Holder decision in 2013 not only got rid of Section 5 pre-clearance of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which mandates that local jurisdictions must get approval from the Department of Justice or federal government before changing voting laws, but also following the enactment of the decision, a variety of new voter ID laws, early voting attacks, and the closing of thousands of polling places nationwide all occurred, tilting many local elections in favor of conservatives. We are yet to see the ramifications of the 5-4 Louisiana v. Calais decision 2026, which dismantled Section 2 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which judiciously establishes that one must prove intentional discrimination and not mere partisan political power plays when drawing congressional districts. Section 2 of the original 1965 Voting Rights Act was a nationwide provision that prohibits state and local governments from imposing any voting qualification, standard practice, or procedure that results in the denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race, color, or membership in a language minority group. It has primarily been used in, quote, vote dilution cases on congressional redistricting to require creation of majority-minority districts. Now that it is gone, there is a lack of any supposed or appropriate justification to form such districts, so congressional maps in favor of conservative political strategy will take precedent, especially in the southern U.S., which has the greatest history of voting discrimination against blacks. Nonetheless, it is clear that both major political parties are not wasting any time in drawing maps in their favor, even if gerrymandering was on paper meant to be standardized to take place in 10-year intervals, and the effects of these decisions will be felt sooner than people will be prepared to confront them. It is clear from the recent decision this week, a couple weeks ago, whereby Georgia state Republicans claimed that they don't have enough time to take up redistricting in the current special session, that Georgia congressional maps will not change anytime soon. However, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, and Tennessee have all implemented redrawn maps in time for this year's election when control of the House is being contested. So what is essentially happening across the southern United States is that there has been a strategical effort by the conservative Republican Party to draw electoral maps in their favor. And this has been done in conjunction with the Louisiana v. Calais decision and the Shelby County decision of 2013, which dismantled the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And what many Democrats and Democrat allies are saying is that the Democrats essentially have to do the same thing that the Republican Party is doing, which is they have to redistrict as aggressively as the Republicans are doing in order to win these elections. But fundamentally, what has to transform in this country is how politics is done in the two-party system, which also includes the Democrat Party. This is one of the reasons why many progressive leaders are calling for reforms, broadly speaking, among the entire political system. And we need a major new political party, as there are political parties like the Working Families Party, the Justice Party, but I believe young people have to take ownership of a new political party that focuses on the reformation of these electoral laws. Reforming them will be very difficult, I do agree, because many of them are reformed at the federal level. Many of them deal with the federal level, the U.S. Congress, U.S. House of Representatives, and U.S. Senate. So it will be difficult for state representatives to really have influence in this process. But as we know historically, any significant reform has been pushed from the bottom, and it always takes grassroots effort and the power of organized people to force public policy changes in Congress. And this may require civil disobedience, and this may require dissent, but more than anything, it will require the formation of political parties, one or several, that focus on reforming these electoral laws. So I thank you for listening to this podcast introducing why why the dismantling of the 1965 Voting Rights Act was so disastrous, and why we have to rehabilitate the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And I'll be back with further videos outlining my 11 points on reforming electoral laws in this country. Thank you.